let's take a look at immigration. And apparently that's something we need to do, given how often we hear this.
It's almost inevitable that we need to talk about immigration.
Who will say anything on this panel about the catastrophe of mass immigration?
Let's talk about why 640,000 people came last year.
And given on Wednesday morning, the Foreign Secretary said this.
But we also need to ask ourselves some hard questions about the impact of 20 years of uncontrolled immigration by low-skilled, low-wage workers and what many see as the consequent suppression of wages and failure to invest properly in the skills of indigenous young people.
OK, look, saying we need to ask ourselves some hard questions implies that we haven't been asking those questions already. Is it just me? I feel like all we do is talk about immigration. It feels like for most of my adult life, the only things we talk about are immigration and how we never talk about immigration. Also, Bake Off. And there was that time where we combined them both when Nadia Hussain was in it and the Daily Mail lost their mind and suggested that to win now you had to make something they called a chocolate mosque. Chocolate mosque sounds like Ben & Jerry's are launching new flavours to capture the religious market. Next it'll be Candy Floss Synagogue and Mint Choc Church. So, let's look at how these so-called hard questions have already been asked and answered and subsequently ignored. In May 2016, the Centre for Economic Performance published an exhaustive study on the impact of immigration from the EU on the UK between 1995 and 2015. The report concluded that EU immigrants had no impact on the jobs or wages of UK-born workers, had no negative effect on local services such as crime, health, social housing, and paid more in tax than they took out in welfare and public services. The report finds, rather than being the fault of immigrants, these problems were the result of the 2008 crash and the slow economic recovery. So, why was this ignored? Well, maybe because facts are boring. Basically, the only person we'll tolerate facts from anymore is David Attenborough. It only took one episode of Blue Planet for him to single-handedly end straws. He's the first person in history to say that's the last straw and mean it literally. Boris Johnson ignored these facts because it clearly would have undermined the Leave campaign. In the lead-up to the vote, a pro-Brexit minister, Bernard Jenkins, told Newsnight they planned to go on the offensive on immigration. The hostility was relentless from the campaign and its supporters in the media. The writer Liz Gerard found that between the 1st of January and the date of the referendum, the Daily Mail and the Daily Express each published 34 front-page articles about immigration. In case you were wondering, none of them were positive. There were no headlines like "Immigrant saves boy from killer shark" or "Foreigners make a lovely jam." The Leave campaign was given a helping hand by years of anti-immigration sentiment that had been encouraged by these guys.
Immigration in this country, as I've said, was too high and out of control. Put simply, Britain was a soft touch.
We help our citizens get jobs instead of more immigration from abroad.
People want government to have control over the number of people coming here and the circumstances in which they come.
Cameron and Osborne spent years shifting the blame onto immigrants for worsening conditions for British people, when in fact it was their now discredited programme of austerity that was doing just that. But when the time came for them to lead a pro-EU campaign, the damage had already been done. The British electoral study asked around 15,000 voters one key question. What matters to you when deciding how to vote in the EU referendum? They took the responses and made it into a word cloud. This is what the Leave voters one looked like. That does not look like a word cloud. That looks like an MRI scan of Nigel Farage's brain. We've been subjected to years of lies about immigration, and I'm not the only one who thinks so. Last month, the Home Affairs Select Committee published a paper called Immigration Policy, Basis for Building Consensus, which said the government needs to be more proactive in challenging myths and inaccuracies, and publish more factual information about the costs and benefits of immigration. And I'm afraid that while this is sound logic, it's a tad too late for the Brexit vote. It's a bit like shutting the stable door after the horse has not only bolted, but is now glue. And if we're to learn the lessons of the last... The horse doesn't exist. Who are you sympathising with? If we're to learn the lessons of the last few years to move forward with a proper conversation about immigration, we need to dispel these myths. And remember that immigrants are human beings that don't deserve to be demonised to appease bigots or used to score political points, like these two morons did. But the sad fact is that intolerance to immigrants is an easy sell. They look different to you and they sound different to you. So everything must be their fault. Countering feeling with facts is difficult. Also, some people will never listen because their hostility is purely racist and there's no point in me, of all people, trying to change their minds. You never hear someone saying, you know why I stopped being racist? Because a brown man told me on the iPlayer. But what about everyone else? Well, if you're trying to get people to take in a large number of facts without switching off, there's only one man for the job. David Attenborough. Our only hope is that the next series of Blue Planet sounds like this.
Here's a weird jellyfish. Also, what's weird in the decade up to 2011, immigrants from the European Economic Area paid 34% more in taxes than they received in benefits. Blammo, you just got Attenborough. Areas of the UK with large increases in EU immigration did not suffer greater falls in the jobs and pay of UK-born workers. Both falls were the result of the recession and a slow recovery. Tick, tick, boom. Turtles just want security for their children. You know who else wants security for their children? EU citizens being routinely used as a bargaining chip. Attenborough out.